Today we are talking about percent word problems. As a reminder, you do not need to write down everything we cover in this lesson, but be sure to jot down important information and at least one example of each type of problem we cover. Also remember that you can pause the video to jot down important notes before you move on, press the rewind button to view information again, or press the fast forward button if you think you got it and you'd like to move on. But just be careful and be sure you don't fast forward too much that you miss out on something important. So let's begin. Overall, when you're solving percent problems, there are two main methods. The first method is to set up a proportion, and the second method is to draw a tape diagram. So we'll be going over both of those methods. Now would be a good time for you to pause the video and jot this down. What we mean by setting up a proportion is that you're setting up two equivalent ratios equal to each other because equivalent ratios are equal to each other. Just be sure to match up parts and wholes. And when it comes to the percent part, the percent is the part and 100 is always your whole because percents always have the denominator or the whole of 100. So we'll talk more about that later. The other method is to draw a tape diagram where the entire box is the whole. That's usually the method that I'll use if I'm trying to visualize what's going on. So we'll go back and forth between those two different methods. Let's look at some problems as an example. This problem asks us which of the following options have the same value as 72% of 50. And you need to choose two answers. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve this on your own first. Okay, so let me set up my pen. They want to know which of these is the same as 72% of 50. So in my mind, I'm thinking I could use the proportion method. If I'm using the proportion method, I want to make sure that I have the percent over the whole, which is 100, 72% out of 100, and then I need to figure out my part and my whole on the other side, part and whole. They want to know 72% of 50. There isn't the word out there, but it's kind of like they're saying 72% out of 50. When they say 72% out of 50, that means that the 50 is the whole, because you want to find something out of the whole. You wouldn't find something out of the part. So the 50 goes down here, and then the part is what we're trying to find. So what we could do is use our equivalent ratios that we have to figure out how to get from one side to the other. Remember, we're doing the same thing on both sides. How do I get from 100 to 50? It's becoming smaller, so it's a division. 100 divided by 2 gets me to 50. So I need to do the same thing up here. 72 divided by 2 as well. And that's going to be 36, I believe. So 36. 36 is 72% out of 50. I can double check my work by using a calculator. I can take 36 and divide by 50, and I should get 0.72, which is the same as 72% to check my work. So let me do that now. 36 divided by 50 is 0.72, or 72 hundredths. 72 hundredths is the same as 72% because it's out of 100. So that means my answer is correct. So the answer is 36. 36 is 72% out of 50, the whole. But that's not what this question is asking us. The question is asking us, what's the math to get there, right? So in order to get there, we took 72 and we divided by 2. Or we took half of 72. So we need to look for answers that got us to do that, okay? So this 72 is being multiplied by 5 over 100. Let's see what 5 over 100 is. 72. Let's see 5 over 100. 5 divided by 100. Is that the same as half? No, it's not. 0.05, that's 5 100ths. So that's not correct. A is out. The next one says 72 times 50. That's a big number. It got to be a huge number. That is also incorrect. Okay, let's do the next one. 72 over 100 times 50. Okay, that got us to 36. So C is one of the answers. And the next one is 72 hundredths times 50. That's also 36. Okay, so C and D could be possibilities. And then the next one is 72 divided by 50 times 100. This already looks really weird. Yeah, not correct. So it looks like it was C and D. If you do the math for C and D, you also get to 36. Because 50 over 100 is like half. And then moving the decimal places over and multiplying by 50 also gets you there. So don't worry if you don't understand how to get to 36 using their methods, because there's so many different methods out there. You just have to go through each of those selections and see if you can get to that 36, because everybody's going to use their different method. Another way you can think about this is I usually like to use 100% as an example. If they ask me, for example, if they ask me what's 100% of 50, I would do 1 times 50, which is 50, right? So now if they're asking me for 50% of 50, I would change that 50% to a decimal, 0.5 times 50, to get that answer. So if they were asking me 72% of 50, I would change 72% into a decimal, 0.72 times 50. So let's see if that works. 0.72 times 50. That also gives us 36, okay? So the reasoning there is if we wanted to find all of 50, one whole of 50, we would multiply to get there. If we wanted to find half of it, we would just change it to 0.5, or half of a whole, to get to 50. So then the reasoning would tell us that if it's 72%, then it would be 0.72 times 50, okay? So that's just another method on how to get 36. So again, don't worry about whether these make sense or not. The point is to get to the correct answer of 36. And there's several different ways to get there, because this method also gets you to 36. Okay, here's another question. Luke and Matthew ran a lemonade stand on Saturday. They agreed that Matthew would get 60% of the profit because the lemonade stand was his idea. They made a profit of $25. How much money did Matthew make? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve it yourself. Okay, so in this problem, we have two people running a lemonade stand, and the agreement is that one person, Matthew, would get 60% of the profit because it was his idea. So he would get more than 50%. He would get more than half. So they made a profit of $25. So what you could do is you can make your proportion. Okay, so your proportion, remember, is two equivalent ratios. We got the percent, the part. It's always going to be out of 100. 60% is 60 out of 100. Now we have to figure out the profit of $25. Is that the part or is that the whole? So let's read this again. They agreed that Matthew would get 60% of the profit. So it looks like it's 60% out of the profit. So the profit is the whole. And they made a profit of $25. So the 25 matches up with the 100, that's the whole. So we need to figure out what's the part that Matthew got, or that he deserved. Use your equivalent ratios. How do we get from 100 to 25? It's getting smaller, so we're going to divide. 100 divided by 4 gets us 25. So up here, we're also going to divide by 4 to get there. 60 divided by 4, we can put that in our calculators. 60 divided by 4 is $15. Okay, so if they had said he got half, 60 divided by 2, he would have gotten $30. Oh, sorry, the profit wasn't $60. That's the percent. The profit was 25. So if half of 25 would have been $12.50. But since he is getting 60%, that should be more than $12.50. So that's 25, that's 60 divided by 4, which is 15. Okay, so he's getting a little bit more than just half. Okay, so that's 15. Using the tape diagram method, you could draw a tape diagram. That is going to be your whole. So here's 0%. Pretend like it's a battery. And here's 100%. Okay, here's $0. $0 is 0%. 100% was their total profit, their whole, $25. So what you'll do is you'll cut it in half for 50%. This is the tape diagram method. You're just setting up a tape diagram. You have values on both sides. You have the money on the top or bottom, doesn't matter, and you have the percents on the bottom, and they have to match up. 0% of the profit is $0. 100% of the profit that they made is $25. So then you're kind of working backwards when you're using a tape diagram. So just like before, if I were to find half of it, it would be, we said $12.50, right? Because we just took 25 and we divided it by 2 to split it down the middle. 25 divided by 2, $12.50. So now if we wanted to figure out 60%, 60% is just, let me use a different color. 60% is just another 10% here. That's 60%. How do we know how much that extra 10% is? It's $12.50 plus some unknown value. So we kind of have to work backwards. Between 0 and 50%, there's a 10%, a 20%, a 30%, and a 40%. We need to figure out how much is in each of these 10%. So the tape diagram method requires you to do a little bit more investigation. We want to figure out what each of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces is equal to, because each of these 5 pieces is equal to 10% in the percent side, but we don't know how much they are on the money side. That we don't know. So we have to figure out what each of these 5 pieces is worth. So it's $12.50 divided into 5 pieces. That'll tell me what each of those 10% is worth. Okay, so $12.50 divided by 5. Each of those is $2.50. Okay, each of those 10% is worth $2.50. That's for each 10%. So then that means that this extra 10% would be an extra $2.50. So the 50% was $12.50 plus another 10% is $2.50. So we have to do a little bit of investigation to get to that 60%. We had to work backwards to find out what 1/10% was by dividing into those 5 pieces. 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. And then when we add them together, we get $15. Okay? Yes, it looks like it's more work. However, it's a great way to visualize what's going on. And sometimes when you're stuck on a problem, it's a great backup plan. You don't have to use it every time. It looks like a lot, okay? So if you know your equivalent ratios, you are just so much better off because it's a great shortcut. But that is the tape diagram method. Here's another problem. There are 25 students in Miss Wynn's second grade class. In the class election, 4 students voted for Benjamin, 12 voted for Sahil, and 9 voted for Maria. What percentage of the class voted for Maria? So go ahead and pause and try that on your own. All right, for this question, there are 25 students. Let's see, 4 were for Benjamin, 12 were for Sahil, and 9 were for Maria. I first want to check if these add up to 25. Let's see, 4 plus 12 plus 9. 8 plus 9 is, wait, that's 6. 6 plus 9 is 5. Yes, okay, so everybody voted. That's good to know. Let's see, what percentage of the class voted for Maria? So we don't know the percentage. Normally we would put our percentage up here and the 100 on the bottom, but we don't have that. That's what we need to find out. So that's why that one's blank. And so we want the part and the whole. So we have 9 for the part, 9 part of the class voted for Maria, and the whole would be 25 total students. 9 people voted for her. So we're going to go ahead and use the equivalent ratios method. 100 needs to divide by 4 to get to 25. So, oops, let me go backwards. We're going the other direction to figure out that number. So 25 times 4 gets to 100. So 9 also has to multiply by 4. So that's 36. 36% of the people voted for Maria. An easier way would be that you notice that we already have a part and a whole. 9 out of 25. Remember, we can easily find a percent by taking the numerator and dividing it by the denominator. And that should also give us our answer of 36%. So let's check that in the calculator. 9 divided by 25. The only difference you'll see here is that it's as a decimal. 0.36. Okay, the answer is not that 0.36% people voted for her, it's that it's not in percent form yet. So you still have to take your decimal point and move it over twice so that you get 36%. So it's a shortcut, but it requires you to do a little extra work afterwards. Okay, while this one just gives you 36%. But either way, it's 36%. I feel like that one would be a little bit of a pain to use the tape diagram. So if you can utilize either of these methods, that would be best for you. For this problem, it's asking us which of the following options have the same value as 75% of 96. Go ahead and pause and see if you can solve it yourself. All right. So here's another problem where they have a bunch of different people's work and you just have to figure out which ones get you the same value. So it would be helpful if you solved it on your own first, just like we did with the first problem, and then just go through these and see which ones also give you that answer. So we want to find 75% of 96. 75%. So they gave you a percent, 75 out of 100, and it's out of 96. So that means that this is our whole. Wholes go on the bottom and parts go on top. They want to know which has the same value as 75% of 96. That means we don't know that value. So that's our blank. So we're going to go ahead and take the calculator and we're going to take 100 and we're going to divide by 96. That's a weird number, but we're going to use that, okay? It's going to divide by 1.04166666. 1.04166666. That's what happens when you use this method, okay? So I'm just showing you what it looks like. So if you do use this method, you're not like freaked out. So on the top, you're also going to take that number and divide by that number. It's a gross number, but it'll work. 75 divided by 0.041, and as many sixes as you can fit on there because we couldn't fit it. And that equals 72, okay? Didn't look like it would work out, but it does. Because that's how equivalent ratios work. So it's 72. 72 out of 96 should get you 75%. Let's check it. 72 divided by 96 should equal that 75%. 72 divided by 96, 0.75, okay? Because it gives it to you in decimals. So that's before you move it over, okay? That's the equivalent ratios method. The other thing you can think about is what we mentioned on the very first problem. Think about if it were 100% of 96. That would be 1 times 96. If it were 50% of 96, it would be 0.5, half times 96. So here when it says 75%, you're just doing 75%. And you're changing it to 0.75 times 96. And that should get you your answer as well. Let's try it. 0.75 times 96. Boom, 72. Okay, so that's a second method you can use. That's my go-to method because it's super quick. If you wanted to use the tape diagram method, you can totally do that as well. 75% of 96, so that means 0% matches up to 0. 100% matches up to our whole, which is 96. So half of it would be half of 96, which is 48. Okay, and then because all you did was take 96 divided by 2 to get to 48. And then 75% would be halfway between those two. So you would just find the number that's halfway between 48 and 96. And then when you do that, you get 72. So there's 3 different methods for you to get that answer, which doesn't matter because you're just finding the 3 answers that get you to that magical number, which is 72. So you just want to try out all of these and see if they'll get you to 72. Okay, so let's try that out. Let's take 3/4, 3 divided by 4, and we're going to multiply that by 96. That's 72. Okay, so A works. Remember, if you haven't noticed by now, Khan Academy likes to use a shortcut, which is that the dot represents the same as multiplication sign. So all that means is you're multiplying. Okay, so A works. It got us to 72. Let's try the next one. 75 out of 100 times 96. That looks very familiar. It looks like what we did down there. 0.75 times 96. So that should also work, and it does. And then, oh, this one is exactly what we did over here. 0.75 times 96. We just changed that percent into a decimal. So that one works. This one is not going to work, the 75 times 96, because you're going to get a huge number. It's only going to be in the thousands. This one's also not going to work because it's 4/3. That means it's more than 100%. It's overflowing. So that's also going to give you a huge number. 4/3 times 96. I'll show you. Right? 128. That's not 72 or 75%. It's way more than 75%. So the answer is A, B, and C. Okay? Let me know if you have questions as you work on this. There are a lot of different methods. So it's up to you to choose what works best for you. And it could depend on the problem that you're working on. Sometimes I like to use a tape diagram. Other times I like to use the equivalent ratios. And then other times, if it's just a percent that they give you, I love to just use my little shortcut here by thinking about what I would do for 100%, 50%, and now this percent by changing it into a decimal. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in class.